Hello, everyone. I am Kevin Tynan, Senior Automotive Analyst and Global Director of Automotive Research for Bloomberg Intelligence. Excited today to host the Digital Manufacturing Navigating a New Reality webinar. Today's panel is largely focused on mobility technology across many sectors. As an auto analyst, my perspective may be focused on companies that supply parts or assemble passenger vehicles, though I expect the diversity of our group today, our roster of executives, will take the discussion into other areas of mobility, and that's great. We want to hear well beyond just what's happening in automotive and in passenger vehicles. Before we bring in the panelists, let me take care of some housekeeping here. If Zoom crashes, please close and reopen the application. Refresh your browser if you're having issues with sound or video. Try and close all applications and web pages to increase some bandwidth. And click the raised hand icon at the bottom so I can sort of line up speakers as we get into some of the discussion topics. There's also a chat box. You can network your contact information with peers and other executives on the panel. Also, as far as social media, please engage with @Bloomberg Live on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or wherever you like to share your posts. And finally, let me thank our sponsor, the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, for helping make this virtual roundtable possible. And I'd like to introduce Dave Roberts. He's the Chief Innovation Officer at the IEDC, and give him the floor to say a few words. Dave, if you would.
Sure. So thanks, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be with you and the rest of the group today. My name, as you mentioned, is Dave Roberts. I serve the state as the Chief Innovation Officer, but before coming to public service, I was actually in the advanced battery industry, leading Delphi Electronics spinoff that was focused on lithium-ion battery manufacturing from about the 11 to 14 range. And if you're tracking that industry well, you know that that was pretty early on. There are a lot of changes that happened during that time frame. And so at the end of 14, I went to a nonprofit R&D lab called the Battery Innovation Center, which is located here in Indiana and has supported over 350 companies, helping them mature their energy technology solutions. Prior to that, I was with Caterpillar as well, helping them develop a patent portfolio around hybrid drivetrains. And I give you that background just to let you know that this topic of digital manufacturing, as I call it, really the future of all manufacturing, is near and dear to my heart, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's also near and dear to the heart of the state of Indiana generally. Depending on the year, Indiana is actually the most intensive state for manufacturing in the union. We have deep and rich history of making things across diverse segments, especially, Kevin, as you noted, in the automotive industry. We're behind Michigan as #2 in absolute gross state product from automobiles. But we've also been strong in aerospace, defense sectors, med device, heavy industrial sector, particularly with steel and other metals, and generally the electronics sector. But as a state, strategically, what we're doing is looking at this disruption that occurs when technology tips over from being its own vertical and becomes a horizontal and intersects with traditional verticals that have been strong here in Indiana. In manufacturing, to really take advantage of that intersection, we're standing up a new public-private nonprofit lab called the EMC Squared, Emerging Manufacturing Collaboration Center. That facility is set to open in Q1, and we're proud to have anchor partners in GE Additive and AWS Industrial IoT. And in that facility, we're also going to be exploring the future of autonomous transportation. So we'll be housing autonomous race cars that are competing in what's called the Indy Autonomous Challenge. We had a first competition at our Indy Motor Speedway in October, and at CES, they'll have the first race. So that'll be Las Vegas in January. I know we have a few LiDAR manufacturers on the panel today. And so if you or frankly anyone is planning to be there, please let me know so we can connect. And with that, I'll turn it back over and just say that I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
Thanks, Dave. And I will be at CES I will definitely like to check that out and meet with any other panelists that are planning to be there. I saw a bunch of company names on the roster. So let's get started here. And let me just say, in my 20 plus years as an automotive analyst, this is by far the most dynamic and exciting period that I've been through. And that includes the bankruptcy period, which was a little bit more, had a little bit more of a negative spin on it. But a lot changed structurally during that period as well. So let me start with Anna, and the question is, and looking at some of the content your company produces in terms of on the website, it talks about an autonomy revolution, and I'm quoting it, changing innumerable aspects of our economy and daily lives, and that sounds like a tall task, right? A tall order, and especially as we're looking at it globally, right? And regions don't always advance at the same pace or have the economies to do so. So can you just start us off and obviously invite everybody to jump in, raise hands, or add comments as you see fit. Just talk about how the vision on how that evolves globally, how we get to this level of mobility, whether as a service or in society, getting to the point where it's safer, it's more efficient, it's available to everyone. If you could just kind of start us with that, Anna, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I'm Anna Brunel. I'm the CFO at Ouster, and I think it's important to just lay a little bit of groundwork and say that Ouster is a leading provider of digital LiDAR sensors, and we ship sensors today to approximately 600 customers across 50 countries. And these customers really provide us with a unique window into the manufacturing trends that are playing across the 4 verticals that we serve, which include automotive, industrial, robotics, and smart infrastructure industries. And so we really see how LiDAR will be powering autonomy in a worldwide way. And, to give examples, we think that LiDAR will be, digital LiDAR will be as ubiquitous as digital cameras are today. So we think there's an opportunity for us to really outfit every moving piece of equipment or vehicle on Earth, as well as the smart infrastructure that monitors moving vehicles and equipment. And so, if you think about our customers today, digital LiDAR is already found powering autonomous mining trucks in Siberia with our customer Waytus, autonomous tractors in the Central California Valley with Blue-White Robotics. We're enabling collision avoidance on gantry cranes in dockyards with companies such as Cone Cranes, and on autonomous forklifts in France with companies such as Valeo. And we have autonomous drones that are using digital LiDAR to inspect, long stretches of railway infrastructure in Canada with companies like Easy Aerial. And we're using autonomous robots to inspect kind of hazardous industrial zones in Prague, or delivering pizza in Los Angeles with Serve Robotics. And so I think it's really important to understand that we're using digital technology to create LiDAR technologies that are very affordable, very ubiquitous, and can be used to provide safety and automation across industries. And I think that's something that's really unique and timely in terms of answering your question about how are we going to be able to really make a difference worldwide across industries, with safety and efficiency. And I think digital LiDAR is the solution to do that.
Go ahead, Omer. I see your hand is raised. Feel free to jump in. And then Jim, I see you can follow up with that as well.
Yeah, so Innoviz is developing LiDARs to autonomous vehicles. To your question of where that leads us in transformation in the world, I see that as trying to solve a very meaningful problem that probably the market already got used to. People are using transportation and mobility for tens of years. And there is a certain, I would say, people got used to the fact that there is a certain toll that you need to carry. 1.3 million people are dying every year because of car accidents. And for some reason, there is no sufficient sense of urgency in trying to solve that problem while the technology is already available. Innoviz is providing high-performance, low-cost LiDAR to the automotive space. We are launching our LiDAR with the BMW cars that are going to bring level 3 to the market as the first car maker in the market. And that would solve a problem that I think should have arrived much earlier. When people saw that in Corona, many people have died, there was a sense of urgency to try to solve that problem. And once you started to see less people being dead from COVID, you see more and more accidents. And for some reason, that's okay. And that's not. And we are very proud to be in the lead in terms of providing the solution that can actually solve that problem.
Jim Barnhart, CEO of Velodyne, you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you. I certainly agree with the comments made by the two prior panelists, since 3D LiDAR, from the time that Velodyne first developed it, has really taken off in the last few years. And what we're really all about is driving safety, democratizing safety as we discuss it internally. And whether it's for the applications mentioned with the helping with autonomous driving, but certainly the ADAS, the advanced driver assist systems, and we have various sensors available in all those areas. But I think the real key is really making more efficient, more accurate, and private way of really helping with safety. There have been the concerns out there with some of the other technologies, whether it's the camera-based radar plus camera-based, where it starts to be the privacy concerns with the camera perhaps capturing facial recognition, that sort of thing. That's one of the nice things about LiDAR. The sensors don't have that level of you can't tell who the person is. You can just tell that there's the person there. So I think really LiDAR technology really is enabling the measuring, monitoring of the environment, helping to optimize safety. Whether it's for the road users or some of the perilous industrial applications just discussed, it truly is becoming ubiquitous. And so with the solid state sensors that we're developing, putting out there as well, we're helping to drive down the cost curve. So I think we're going to see, as it was previously mentioned here, that it will in the days ahead, certainly the years ahead, become as ubiquitous as even digital cameras, whatnot. The LiDAR technology is going to become that affordable and that capable. And so I'm really looking forward to that as we develop into the future here.
Lisa, before I let you comment, let me just ask and maybe steer the question. And I know this has been something that at Bloomberg we've talked about all the way up to Mike himself about sort of standardizing safety globally, right? What we see in vehicle content in terms of safety in the United States or Germany is very different than in emerging markets. So Lisa, if you could, we all understand the benefits of safety. One of the things, or three of the things we're always looking at, from an automotive perspective, consumers will always pay for safety, efficiency, and connectivity, it seems like, in this market. But how do we smooth out that safety globally to markets where it's not $45,000 average transaction per vehicle like we see in the US here or in parts of Europe? How do we get safety into some of these emerging markets?
Well, thank you for the question. So my name is Lisa Åbom, and I represent a company called Naira Dynamics, and I think I'm a little bit the odd bird in this group, perhaps. Our company is a software-based company, and we've been around for the last 20 years or so, providing safety features based on software to the automotive industry. But I think in the context what you asked for, how can we democratize or how can we make technology available also for countries where perhaps not the monetary strength is as high as perhaps in Sweden. What we do is that we collect the information from the sensors that we build, the virtual sensors that we have available on the cars, to give information about the road infrastructure. So we have right now about 1 million cars driving around the roads of Europe and of the US, giving us information about road safety, such as right now we have blizzards and snowstorms in Sweden. So there is a lot of slippery roads in Sweden. This information we can hand back to the cars, either as a warning, which is perhaps embedded in the car that can give you the warning directly, or as your question was posed, how can you make this available also to the broader environment? You can actually use an app, so you can have it in your smartphone. You can get warnings on the road situation ahead of you in the car. What I wanted to just point out when listening to the previous speakers, what we can provide is information that lies way ahead of you in your car, not just where your car is at right now, but you can get the information from someone who was driving the road 20 seconds before you that will tell you the road situation ahead of you. So I think that is the kind of a different kind of perspective we take, using software-based functions, making them available through the cloud perspectives to anyone that would be interested in having road safety information.
Thank you. And that's an interesting perspective as a software company, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. Marta, it's good to see you made it.
Thank you.
Feel free to have the floor.
Thank you very much. Marta Oshimov, I'm Chief Financial Officer of Oxbotica, software development company for self-driving vehicles. Safety is absolutely the key topic of any conversation when it comes to moving on and transforming the world and the way people and goods move and moving the earth. So, and I'm pleased that colleagues, panelists here are from industries where we use LiDAR, we use laser, we use radar for our technology. And safety is key. And Omar, I think you mentioned that how is it acceptable seeing so many road accidents on roads today, and not urging to roll out autonomous fleets out there to make the machines do more and work more efficiently in a safer manner. The aspect of standardization that was mentioned as well. If I give you a little bit of flavor of how, and I'm sure you all know this, but autonomous vehicles learn from each other. So if there's an AV, autonomous vehicle operating in Singapore, it can learn because of data sharing from a vehicle that encounters a particular challenging situation in, let's say, European country or US. Because that data is shared amongst the masses of vehicles that will be deployed at scale in years to come, the safety aspect can be absolutely fast forwarded and prevention happens. So when we think about standardizing safety, I think Oxbotica as a software player, we believe that our universal horizontal platform applicable to various segments of industries out there will be able to just be programmed or adhere to the rules and regulations of various geographies and countries as they happen, but ultimately is a one product that serves all globally.
Thank you. All right, so let me take it this direction. So it seems, from my perspective as an analyst and the companies that I cover, there's AV and EV have been very closely married through this process. And process, I mean, going back to the bankruptcy period, 2008, 2009, sort of reset the automotive world. Costs were rationalized, debt was eliminated, companies were restructured, and then operating profits started to come back about 2012, 2013. And then this investment, this real flood of investment sort of caught up, pent up maybe through those periods of cash preservation. And I think that's where we are now, right? So this innovation period has been sort of started from that period of operating profit returning. And in that time, it's been a lot of EV and AV. I would argue that AV has sort of maybe got knocked back a little bit or off the pace of EV through the pandemic, just in terms of what is the next big thing, the horizon just being shorter for EV versus AV. But can we all talk about how AV doesn't really need or does need EV to make that progress? Does it need to stay in lockstep because it's from a clean sheet of design and technology? Or can, where in the US we're below 3% EV penetration at this point, can we go ahead with AV in mobility, not just passenger vehicles, without this high adoption rate that we might have in China or in Europe, where the government is much more involved? Who want you, Marta? You want, or Omer? Why don't you start there, and Marta will come to you next.
Sure. So what I can share is that from the customer wish to use LiDARs for additional safety, we see that completely separated from any activity that is either combustion or electric vehicle. The need for additional safety measures for a vehicle are not directly connected to the use of an electric engine or not. Eventually, it's just a matter of safety features. Combustion engine can supply power that is sufficient for any technology, and so does the electric vehicle.
So those contracts, the pursuit of those contracts, whether your technology or your drivetrain technology agnostic, right? Whether it's internal combustion, whether it's electric, doesn't matter. Same.
Yeah, I can give you an example. So on the BMW program, where it's the platform that is developed, that is planned to be used across the 7 series, the 5 series, and the iX. Some of them are combustion and some of them are electric. The platform is agnostic.
Jim?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it needs to be tied to EVs. Certainly, I think one of the things we're seeing is just the financial model. The automakers with the internal combustion engines developed a certain model with certain options and certain features that are going to be on the vehicle, and there's a small incremental cost, if you will, of putting in new LiDAR systems. But if you look at it, I think what the EVs are doing is they're just, if you will, baking that investment into the model of the products they're selling. So I think that's why you're probably seeing more prevalence. I don't know there'd be any EV developed today that wouldn't have the sensing capabilities built in. And of course, it's not yet the case with all the internal combustion engines. Like I said, I think it's really just more of the business model, the financial model on it. Having said that, one of the things that we really saw during the pandemic was an enormous pull from the last mile delivery type folks for automation in warehouse, automated autonomous forklifts, and just the AMRs, the autonomous mobile robots for doing the sidewalk crawler, last mile delivery, right to your doorstep. I think all of those things, as those are taking off, and I have to say it was a bigger growth opportunity for us than we anticipated with the industrials really taking off the way they have. That will help get the volumes up. That will help bring the costs down. But I think inevitably will help have the automotive folks adopting LiDAR sooner in the future as well. And those are kind of the trends that we're seeing.
Anna, did you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, we obviously expect to see greater EV adoption over time, but what's really interesting about our business is that, we work with a lot of customers who are adopting today ahead of that. And so, for example, Plus AI, which supplies robo-trucking solutions to Amazon. We have the largest publicly reported binding commitment for LiDAR sensors with them to supply 2,000 sensors to over 1,000 Amazon trucks. And so, we're seeing these projects rolling out today because, automation gives an opportunity to increase, fuel efficiency by 10% on those trucks, for example. And so there's really no reason to wait for EV in order to adopt LiDAR. And similarly, we also announced 3 strategic customer agreements with multiple automotive customers in the past few months, including Local Motors, Perrone Robotics, and Jusen. And in those examples, we plan to supply over 1,000 scanning sensors for autonomous vehicle applications. And these customers are using 3 to 6 sensors per vehicle, to be able to see and automate around the vehicle. And, these next generation systems are being put into place as early as the 4th quarter of this year. And so, the current quarter that we're in even. And so, we're seeing this adoption happen today. And I think part of what makes that really accessible is that digital LiDAR solutions are becoming very affordable. They're very ubiquitous. We're already developing, positive gross margins across our hardware platforms and selling into, multiple customers across verticals and across, automotive applications. And so, in cases where these customers are ready to adopt today, whereas maybe EV technology for passenger vehicles is a little bit further into the future, we're really excited to see that digital technology is really winning these customers and getting them excited about deploying now.
Thanks. Dave, hang on one second. I'll get to you in a second. So let me ask that question then. If companies or customers are sort of adopting the technology for internal combustion, is there any does the process have to reset, or is there any difficulty in when EV adoption increases, or is it as easy as doing it on a refresh of an internal combustion vehicle as opposed to just the complete the wire harness or the power delivery of an electric vehicle just being different than the way it is for an internal combustion? Does that change anything? I don't know if that's more of a CEO or COO question, but Anna, if you want to continue with that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, I think the trick is that digital LiDAR technologies are applicable across many, many projects and many, many industries. And so, like I said, we're selling to 600 customers in 50 countries today. And these customers are using our digital LiDAR sensors for a wide variety of applications, whether it's, mining equipment in Siberia or automotive vehicles that are on the road today, such as the Plus deal with Amazon. And so, we don't see, we're just agnostic, right? We're going to supply LiDAR to all of these customers. And we ultimately see LiDAR sensors being on, as I said, every moving piece of vehicle or equipment on Earth, as well as the smart infrastructure that monitors them. And so in our mind, there's really no difference. We're supplying LiDAR to many, many customers, whether combustion engine or electric vehicles or smart infrastructure, whether they're tractors, whether they're mining vehicles, whether they're robo-trucking, whether it's last mile delivery, it doesn't matter. They're all going to be using digital LiDAR sensors, and we're really excited about supplying those.
So how early in the process of that are you involved, right? From the ground up of the vehicle, or do you come in sort of after that vehicle is largely designed and engineered?
Yeah, I mean, I think our customers are working with our sensors for months, or even perhaps in some cases over a year, working with the sensors and integrating those into their technology and doing the safety testing and doing the on-road testing. And so, I think there is a timeline to adoption from an initial program kicking off to when you actually see these products out in market. But I think we're really at a tipping point where as I said, we've been working with approximately 600 customers for, quite some time now. And we're just going to be able to announce more and more of these deals and create more and more momentum across LiDAR adoption, around the world. And we're just really excited about that.
Thanks, Anna. Dave, I'm going to ask you to hold your thought because I have another question for you. So I'll let you speak last on this and then ask you the next question first. So Marta, why don't you go ahead and make your point? And then we'll go to Lisa.
Yes, so similarly to Anna, our software platform is completely agnostic to any hardware that it needs to be integrated into. So the argument about EV versus AV and how the combustion engine come into that is it can be completely decoupled from the actual adoption of the technology. We are seeing autonomy journey developing over time, gradually as we are able to safely deploy to industries out there, whether it's industrial vehicles first, through passenger shuttle, through goods deliveries, and ultimately gradually moving towards consumer vehicles in years to come. It's a continuous improvement journey, but absolutely agnostic and flexible enough to be applicable for different domains out there.
Thank you. Lisa?
Sure. No, I would agree with what the earlier speakers have said, but I would like to add that I think that EVs are kind of pushing technology in a way that combustion engines might not be doing. And by adding more functionalities and as in our case, using software to kind of understand better how to dynamically control the vehicles, I think that could be a good stepping stone towards more autonomous vehicles as well. And I think, I mean, speaking for the situation maybe in Europe, EVs are pushed largely by environmental factors as well as energy prices and gasoline prices going up. So I think EVs are pushed by that fact rather than any other factors. And autonomous vehicles are pushed by I guess, technology or opportunities, as the last mile delivery comment that was made earlier. I think that makes sense as well. But I think EVs are pushing technology in a sense that would pave the way for autonomous vehicles as well.
Yeah, that's a whole other panel, the whole EV debate. Jim, why don't I give you the last word on? Sorry, Dave, why don't I give you the last word on this, and then we'll let me ask you another question
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, I was going to kind of make a point similar to what Lisa made, and that is, it seems to me, coming from the EV sector, supplying batteries to Volvo, to BAE Systems for their bus systems, it seemed to me that the entire EV sector had really laid claim to the clean tech title, and therefore you see an industry that had different maybe higher cycles, boom bust. But it's definitely in a boom season right now. And this is part of me learning about the AV sector and not knowing it as well, but it seems to me that the AV sector has done a very nice job of being more steady and applicability and highlighting the security aspect. I would just encourage the companies, if there's a way to also couple with the clean tech and reduction of fossil fuels, to maybe start messaging around that to the extent you're not already doing so. And just a real quick comment, that India Autonomous Challenge I mentioned earlier is actually based on an internal combustion engine, but it allowed those partners that came along, like Cisco on their mesh network or Schaeffler on their drive-by-wire system, iterate their technology much more quickly and then put it into use settings that are applicable today at mass scale, not solely in the electric vehicle segment.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I mean, and I'll just comment, and like I said, it's a whole nother webinar. Electrification globally is uneven, I think largely because of the way governments are involved. Here in the US, we're sort of subsidizing the customer to buy electric vehicles while an automaker may be unprofitable in the technology. And therefore, it's really a supply issue, that the product isn't that good, or it's not there, or it's not even being made at all, because the last thing as an enterprise you want to do is be making and selling a high volume of unprofitable vehicles, where the emissions reduction goals in Europe are a little bit more punitive, in the sense that if you don't hit these goals there, it is still a P&L story for those automakers, or in certain parts of Asia Pacific, where you have the government subsidizing the automakers in terms of those losses that they're making on EV, that we just don't have here in the US yet. So it comes down to, when it's profitable, we'll get better products and we'll get higher penetration rates as we go there. But Dave, let me start for you. And I see some hands are up, but we'll go on to the next subject, and then we'll have time to circle back if we want to. But Dave, and not just with autonomous vehicles and self-driving and things like that, but as an innovation officer for a company or for a corporation that in a state that does a lot of manufacturing, talk to us about what it means for the state, because if I'm reading it right, if there's innovation gets us to the point where we're more efficient, where we save lives on the road, where carbon output is reduced, it seems like we're doing that with fewer and fewer people, right? That the size of a lot of these enterprises, automakers specifically, automakers dependent on internal combustion, are just too big, right? That we're just not going to need this many people manufacturing. We've seen it to a large extent through the pandemic, everywhere through the supply chain, including at retail, right? We can sell directly. We don't need salespeople on the floor. Talk to us about, from your perspective as a state, trying to win manufacturing contracts, how you're thinking about that going forward.
Yeah, so sure. So innovation has always been about a balance between threats and opportunities. And for us, we see a high level of manufacturing concentration as both. And if we're not involved in a wave of Industry 4.0, and if we're not aware of where industry trends are going, then it's going to be more of a threat. However, if we're taking advantage of the opportunity, I think we can set the deck for the next 40, 50 years for Indiana to continue to play a strong role in manufacturing, certainly here in the US, but globally as well. So I think that's a challenge to each of us to think about threats and opportunities. The other way that I think that the government can play a role, and this is both at the state level, but especially at the federal level, is on the buy side. the largest consumer in the United States is the US government. And so if the US government makes decisions to purchase electric vehicles or autonomous vehicles or ADAS-enabled vehicles, that can dictate a lot more of how the industry goes much more quickly than any sort of legislative stimulus package. And that's a policy decision. So I think that's an important way that we can play a role here. We're trying to do that here in Indiana. We're trying to stay active, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we want to promote those things that illuminate the technology like the Autonomous Challenge did.
Thanks. Katja, could you weigh in?
Yes, thank you very much. And I would like to add a little bit to the transformation in Industry 4.0 topic from another perspective, maybe, because we've been talking a lot about manufacturing. And the interesting thing here is that I'm a representative of a company that is coming from a pure people-driven business. Yeah, we've been founded 40 years ago, and we have almost 8,000 employees worldwide. And so this means for us that the transformation as a change and further development is never quite complete. Yeah, and to position the company safely for the future, we think constantly to rethink our business. And so over the past 40 years, we have entered many times new technology fields. And the question for us has always been the ability to quickly adopt new technology, build up necessary know-how, and acquire new business area. And this is a part of our DNA. And of course, 40 years ago, we came from a powertrain development, but today at least 70% of our total workforce is engaged with autonomous driving development and software solutions, electric mobility, and alternative drives. So we have more or less the whole automotive sector and major OEMs as our customers. And what we are going through currently is a clear strategy switch, rethinking our business, coming from a development partner. And I see here also in the under my name that we are still mentioned as a development partner, but currently we are making a transition into a tech solution provider. Because we see that all the major customers have huge demands for partners that are ready and able to take responsibility for major parts of their value creation. And this is something that is moving us at the moment. And at present, those demands particularly affect end-to-end software development and especially autonomous driving. And we are developing also into a tech hub with an understanding of system and integration expertise with our own solutions, of course, and also products. And for us, the thing that has moved us over the past years, but especially since the pandemic and over the past 2 to 3 years, is how we can transform internally, how we can transform our knowledge, how we can transform our people, our leadership, and our own solution and products. So this is maybe a little bit more holistic view compared to the discussions we have had before. But the Industry 4.0 is, for me, not only about concrete solutions, but also a holistic approach. And the question, how is a huge company as ours is driving transformation in those circumstances? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anna, you had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I was just going to add, earlier this year, Gartner put out a report that talked about how, it was a report on hyper automation, and it talked about how, worldwide customers would be the first hands by 2025 to touch about 20% of the products and produce being produced in the world. And so, I think that really shows you where, automation is going to go in manufacturing if you spend a little bit of time learning about that. And I think that means that manufacturing jobs of the future will just be much more technical. They'll require expertise in automation. They'll require better knowledge of operational finance, analytics, and even programming. And so, in my mind, I think this is where, governments and businesses can work together to, really stress STEM training and why that's so important, as we move forward, in this more remote economy. And I think, again, we've talked about before how safety is paramount in the automotive industry, but I think similarly in the manufacturing industry, we don't want people in dangerous situations. We want to avoid workplace injuries. We want to avoid deaths in, environments such as mining or warehouse or manufacturing plants. And I think these are reasons for us to automate. And so I think it's a really exciting time for LiDAR to be helping to improve, safety, but also I think we really need to think about, kind of shifts in the workplace, like some of the other speakers were talking about, and how STEM training could really advance the opportunity for, young people who are entering into careers today.
Omer?
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that are interesting is that the progress that manufacturing has done in the last few years, and the electric vehicle, I would say, allowing new players in the automotive players to chip in and change the competitive landscape. And I think that in that manner helped to push the traditional car makers to become more receptive to new technologies that eventually allowed to companies like us to be able to work in this industry. So I think that doing some kind of a reset in the terms of how you build a car, and with the advancements that are made in the manufacturing, has helped to change the entire automotive industry. Also, as you know, for safety products like LiDAR, you need to account for a manufacturing process which is fully automated. And with progress of manufacturing tools, it allows you to produce much more accurately in a faster manner. So it goes hand in hand when it comes to us and need to support different car makers in very high volume. And it allows even a company that is rather young and less experienced the traditional car makers, and being able to approach big car makers and support them with very high capacity. It all goes down to advancements that are already available in manufacturing tools, and more accurate, and of course, cheaper.
Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I certainly agree with the comments the other panelists have made here. I would also add that in the case of Velodyne, if I look at it, it's pretty amazing. In the 40+ year history of the company, it went from the products were almost exclusively built by hand, if you will, very craftsman, artisan type builds in the early days, till where we are today, where our solid state sensors today, the transmit, receive optical subassemblies are entirely automated. They were designed from the get-go with the thought of how do we design these things for automation, for mass production. The placing of the lenses, the placing of the mirrors, the adding our ASICs, the application specific integrated circuits that we've custom designed our proprietary technologies on them. We now have, I don't know if you can see this, but this thing about the size of your small fingernail, there are 8 channels with all the devices, all the components I just mentioned in there on the solid state digital LiDAR units we're producing today. So I think certainly there's going to be less hands-on labor for sure in the manufacturing process, but as is already mentioned here, what's really going to be the focus for the labor force in the future is really the technical aspects, making sure we are designing for that automation, designing for the test capabilities so that we can tell at any point if something's going wrong on the systems. And just the alignment steps itself, which used to take many hours to align, calibrate each channel of the LiDAR sensor. Today, it's completely automated. You punch a button and the robots take over, make it happen. So at the micro level, there's that tremendous change going on. But another, more at the macro level, I guess I would comment on we're seeing change as well is, for decades, for any manufacturing company, there was this push towards, JIT, just in time. You wanted to make sure you didn't have a single dollar more tied up in inventory than you needed to have. It was just always just the parts come in, and just as they arrive, they're assembled into finished goods and move on out. That was great, very optimized for the financial aspect of things. But certainly, as the pandemic pointed out, when you have an entire supply chain that's at lean, as soon as you get any kind of a hiccup into that supply chain, we saw where the pipeline, if you will, of materials coming in went dry. That caused people to start to panic. Then you see people starting to hoard. Then you see what it's really part of what's happening in the supply chain today with all the kinks in the system worldwide is people are over demanding. They're placing orders for more than what they truly need, just in case inventory rather than just in time inventory. So I think a lot of these things, the technology can't change the human instincts, if you will, but I think as we get the better communication flow that's enabled by the sensors we're putting out there, we see that just in time not only had the drawbacks that just mentioned from I'll call it the business continuity perspective, but even before the pandemic, people were looking at it thinking, gee, with the added traffic congestion of these multiple smaller deliveries with the trucks sitting around idling, waiting to trying to get to the factories, et cetera, I think we're going to see as we come back out of the pandemic, as things renormalize, there will be still lean supply chains, but I think there will be more willingness to hold a small amount of inventory in-house, even just to kind of smooth out some of these to buffer some of these disruptions that we've seen. I think that'll be the direction we see as the days ahead here as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take, and I think about that too, and I invite our CFOs to weigh in on this before we get to the next topic. But it seems to me as if, because what we're seeing, especially from the automakers and at retail, is that, and in the U.S. specifically, is that the lower supply, and if we've been shooting for 60 days of new vehicle supply on the ground, and our domestic automakers here were in the 80s, now they're in the 20s. But as an average across the industry for the first time ever in October, I haven't seen the November number yet, but the customer was paying above sticker in the US industry-wide across the board for the first time ever. So I think there's this aspect of more controlled supply while there's still enough demand, and all those other costs, labor or otherwise, have been rationalized, that manufacturers and retailers are actually here in the US liking this situation. Margins on new vehicles are in double digits. They were below 5%. And I'm talking about gross margins. So I feel like, to your point on just in time, that I'm just not sure, and I'd invite Katja, Anna, and our other to CFOs to weigh in on this. Is that it seems like it's a little bit of what we would call whack-a-mole, is because if you had enough computer chips stored up, yet you can't get aluminum, or you can't get lug nuts, right? You don't have a car. So I just wonder how supply chains would know potentially where the next disruption comes from and prepare for it. The way I've put it is that it would be like driving a giant SUV year round, waiting for that storm of the century, right? Not the most efficient way of doing it, but you're prepared if it does happen, but it doesn't happen often. So I don't know, Jiv, if you want to follow up with that before we get to catch on her point.
I think you're absolutely right. I think some of the limitations we see in the supply chain, for sure, they're real. But other cases, I do believe that there are, I don't want to say games being played, but I think in some cases, a distributor might be tempted to say, hey, look, if this product used to cost X, if today I can get 3 or 4X, and in some cases where semiconductor content specifically is involved, I've personally seen, I've talked to suppliers that it's like up to a 20X over what the norm was for the price of that particular component, which I think is I'll use the word absurd even, honestly, but I really do believe that the capabilities are out there with the whole digitization of pretty much everything. The supply chains can get the signals. You can actually see what the demand truly is. And I personally believe that, again, there's probably, in the case of semiconductors, just from my experience in the industry, I'd say there's probably 3X the demand being placed out there today than what is really real. You're seeing lead times up, above 52 weeks, more than a year lead time on parts that used to be, a matter of weeks. So I think it's just really people are wanting to get their place in the queue just to try and see, how do I get my materials flowing in? But exactly, I think to your point, Kevin, I think there are some motivations, shall we say, for people to maybe hold back or otherwise, enjoy the higher prices they can extract right now. That will all normalize itself out in the months ahead, but I think we're going to be in it for a while. They're certainly deep into FY22 or calendar 22, I should say as well. But,
yeah.
but I do believe though that the signals, the capability with whether it be the RFID tracking capabilities, you can tell, you get, if you order a home delivery, for something that's not just within the hour, if you're doing something that's going to take a day or two to get there, they will tell you exactly where it is, which hub it's passing through, when you can expect delivery, et cetera. But that level of visibility, I think ultimately, the system will kind of clear itself out, if you will. But right now, there are, like I said, some false signals in the system that are helping to contort the supply situation that we have.
Katja, did you want to add?
Yeah, thank you very much. But here as well, I would like to add more from a financial steering standpoint, because yes, we had a crisis, especially the last 2 years with the Corona pandemic. And if I consider our company as part of the supply chain, although we are a research and development company, the major point for us was the topic growth funding and growth strategy. Because when you run a company, no matter which time, growth time or crisis time, you always have to be prepared for the future and for the renewal period also after a crisis. So the money always have to follow strategy. And the ability to quickly adopt to this new technology means that you have to think about your long-term impact of CapEx, and allocating the right investments, ensuring the timing, and also getting full value out of the investments is key. And as a research and development company, we are a little bit ahead of manufacturing. This means we are developing today the things that will be manufactured maybe in 3 to 5 years. So for us, for example, also in the midst of the crisis, we maintained all technology and IT investments. And we even realized over the past 2 years significant investments associated with future customer requirements. And and next to this, of course, it was very important for us to keep our trust-based partnership with all the automotive manufacturers and with all the financial institution fund providers, the board, the customers, and the management. And as a company in a crisis or in a transformation as we see it today, a CFO especially must craft a financial narrative and track record that enables to build and keep investors' confidence. Thank you.
Anna, did you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, Ouster, we're a LiDAR company. We're in a significant ramp mode. We're seeing our build plans accelerate by as much as, 4 times per year. And so, we're really looking out right now currently at like our 2023 build plans. And I think, it's really interesting because we're talking about, the digital impact, digital technologies impacting manufacturing. But, Ouster, because we supply LiDAR to so many companies, we just have a really unique insight into what's going on in our customers' roadmaps and our customers' build plans. And as I said, working with over 600 customers in 4 different verticals, even though we're growing that rapidly and we have to take some risk looking out to a 2023 forecast, this idea of working very closely with customers and understanding their needs and where they're at in their pipeline and their decision-making about implementing LiDAR into their production processes, it just gives us a really unique insight. But there is still significant risk when you're deciding on what to order for 2023 today in an emerging growth market. And so I think staying very close to your customers and really understanding their intention and working with them early through the process is very helpful. The other thing I think that's helpful for us is, Ouster's making a digital product. And so as a result of that, all of the technology is on the chip. So there are, literally 10 times fewer parts than in the older analog LiDAR technologies. And as a result of that, we're able to work with outsourced manufacturers. All of our products are able to be outsourced manufactured with our outsourced manufacturer Benchmark in Thailand. And that allows us to really focus on, quality and other areas that are important in the manufacturing process because we've really simplified the number of parts. It's less risk on our 2023 build plan. And it just allows us to have, I think more control throughout the process. And so, I think this idea of making a digital product in a digital age and, really taking advantage of digital technology and having that platform underpinning our product, it just makes it much more affordable, much more manufacturable. And there are just fewer, parts, frankly, to source. 10 times fewer parts to source. So it's just a much better platform.
Omer?
Yeah, one of the things that are also interesting in the Corona or COVID situation is the ability to scale manufacturing. As you become more tied to geographically, it's more difficult to travel, and sometimes the supply chain is becoming more difficult because of traveling issues. The fact that you have a manufacturing process which is very simple and fully automated and actually very cheap to reproduce, it makes us the ability to ramp up a production line anywhere we want. So currently we have already 3 production lines, one in Germany and one in the US, and now we're also having it in Israel. And we are ramping up additional production lines because once you have a process which is fully automated, and all you need to do is just build another line, and it's usually very small table set because the machines are operating in a very small space, and all you need to have is a clean room. It really helps you to lower your cost. It also comes down to the fact that manpower is not a very significant contributor to the cost of the product because it's all automated, and you're less tied to a specific cost of manpower in different locations. Those are also very important in these days. So in Innoviz, that is part of our expertise. So we are responsible for developing our own manufacturing tools and automated. We did that on Innoviz 1, our first product to automotive, and now we're doing it with Innoviz 2. And we are very minded also about the fact that eventually the supply chain has to be much less complicated. In Innoviz 2, we reduced the number of components also, again, significantly to reduce not only the cost of the product by 70%, but also to simplify the manufacturing process and the cycle time. Thanks.
Thank you. So we only have a couple minutes. Lisa, why don't I give you the floor, and then we'll wrap up with final comments.
Sure, I'll be brief. I think my comment is that speaking about digital sensors or kind of shortening or making supply chain more efficient, what we are providing with virtual sensors where we don't have any hardware at all, I think that's another perspective to look at. I mean, our sensors in a sense are not that precise or not that good as a physical sensor would be. But on the other hand, we don't have any hardware. We use the signals that are already available, providing information or crowd-funded information that gives, that makes maybe physical sensors a bit redundant. Quality maybe less, but without the need for having hardware in the loop at all. So I think that's just a perspective that I think what is in the future is a bit uncertain, and I think things like losses or not having enough things in the supply chain available will push new movements, I guess, ahead.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank everybody. Katja, Omar, Lisa, Anna, Jim, Dave, Marta. It was very informative, and I have to say I feel better. I worry about singularity, right? That if you don't need me to drive anymore, then what do I do? So it was, I understand with the importance of the technology in terms of safety and the number of highway deaths we have in the United States or even globally, and getting that technology into emerging markets where may not be as affordable. It's all very important work that you all are doing and your companies are doing, and that's great, and I thank you for that. Thank you for appearing today. Very insightful. I will be at CES. I'll reach out to anybody who would be happy to meet up and discuss further. And again, post on any of the social media and feel free to contact and continue the discussion. But thank you all very much. And thank you to IEDC, Dave, for sponsoring the panel today. Thank you, everybody, very much. Hope to talk soon.